Commissioner Krieger?
Here.
Commissioner Getzel? Here. Commissioner Connect? Here. Chair Hayward?
Here.
Vice Chair Wood? Commissioner Jackshaw?
Here.
Commissioner Amani? Here. Thank you, everyone.
I'd like to lead everybody in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Moving on. So, going through reports, building activity report, any other comments, questions? No? Seeing none, okay. No vote required on that, so, old business. What do we call the reason? None. New business. Okay, so I'll read this. The planning commission will consider a recommendation to the city council to approve the 2023 fifth cycle housing element update, amend the general plan, and amend the Rey Oaks municipal code to add an affordable housing overlay zone to define areas within farmer corridor within the city in order to meet the city's regional housing needs allocation requirements under the fifth cycle housing element update. The commission will also consider a recommendation to the city council to certify the environmental impact report prepared for this action under the California Environmental Quality Act. I'll turn it over to Denise.
Thank you. My name is Denise Duffy, and we're the housing element consultants and planning consultants for the city of Rey Oaks. Let me know if you can hear me, and if you can, then I'll come on to the bench. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Hayward. The item before you is long and overdue. It is the housing element update, and the actions tonight that you're going to be considering are outlined in your staff report. I'm going to give a brief presentation, a little bit of an overview of what you've heard in the past, for those who may not have heard some of these items, and then talk about some of the elements of each of the actions. The requirements of housing elements, background regarding this particular fifth cycle housing element, and then consideration of the actions regarding approval of a housing element update, general plan and zoning amendments, including the zoning ordinance and consideration of the EIR. Just want to let you know that each of these items are recommendations to the city council, who will have the final authority to identify any concerns or approve the action. There'll be an opportunity for public comments after the close of my comments and any commission considerations, and then we'll bring it back to the commission for their considerations and actions. I'll walk you through those. The basic elements here is that each jurisdiction must have adequate zoning to meet housing arena. It's identified the Chair. The goals and policies within the housing element to provide adequate housing for the entire community, all economic segments of the community, and the housing element itself does not require the city, or would not provide actually building of units. That would be up to a future developer or entity. It's not part of this action. So whatever approval happens is your approval of legislative actions and approvals, not action development. For the city in particular, there's 86 units within all the income ranges for the fifth cycle. And within the city it's found over the last number of years, if they do not have adequately residentially zoned vacant sites to meet the housing need, and rezoning is required in order to do that. And that's consistent with the housing element that was adopted originally, which is 1992. There was identification not of vacant sites within the city to accommodate the housing need. That was consistent with 2003 housing element draft, 2006, 2007 letter from Belinda Boyd, HCD, at that time, saying that housing element is able to be approved, except for you need to rezone. And again, also happened in 2019. Same exact thing as it's available. Oh, I have to share my screen, excuse me. Oh.
Yes. Change the setting. Yes. Very much.
So the regional housing needs assessment is shows the 86 units and identified very low, moderate income and above income units for the fifth cycle. That's the 86 number that's required of new construction. Because the city has not adopted a housing element in the 90s, there was also the fourth cycle shortfall. So the total of fourth cycle for very, very low was added to the fifth cycle, which is total of 86. This also shows the coming sixth cycle housing element requirement of 184 units, which is also analyzed in the EIR. The process for identifying where housing could occur is through the site's inventory requirement. This has been talked about a lot, but particularly in our fifth cycle, for those who looked around during the fifth cycle analysis, and there is an element that identified a fifth cycle sites inventory. Again, the same sites that were looked at in the previous housing element cycle reviews that HT has done. The process to confirm which sites would be available for development of future affordable housing units for the arena began in 2019 for the fifth cycle housing element and reaffirmed again in 2022 and 2023. And I think all of the commissioners here may be very comfortable and aware of the different maps that we've shown over all of these different years of the housing element sites inventory and the requirements. There are also, of course, the draft housing element of 20 and onto the cycle, which is found on the website. The sites inventory found that unfortunately there's not enough land that we talked before about Rey Oaks being landlocked in a lot of ways and having constraints in terms of not just water, but also in terms of the airport districts and other constraints. And therefore HCD directed the housing element for fifth cycle to sites 1 and 1A. And they did that directly with letters to the city in 2019, 2020, and 2023. And the council and planning commission have affirmed these sites and these locations for the fifth cycle, and not just in March 2023, but in other meetings, which we have records of. Government code for compliance requires that if you cannot find once a determination has been made that you have an unaccommodated housing need, you need to rezone the sites within the first year of a new planning period to meet unaccommodated housing need. City has amended the housing element for the fifth cycle, and they did that in 2019. HCD completed the review of the document in 2020. HCD said rezone sites 1 and 1A in order for us to be compliant. During that period of time, there was a lawsuit that was filed against the action that the city council took at December 17th of 2019. That action was against the adoption of the housing element and the CEQA certification of the initial study of negative debt. That lawsuit was withdrawn after a certain number of months, and we were left with with a housing element adopted with a CEQA document, an initial study negative deck that is valid. However, as part of that, as to be very cautious, the city determined that it is in their best interest to prepare an EIR on the action of the housing element adoption and the rezoning, and also was able to provide combination of looking at the cumulative analysis of both fifth and sixth cycle of the CIR that should be considering later today. So the city is now after, the city also prepared an updated housing element for fifth cycle and released that in April of 2023. It's been on the website since then, city's website. HCD reviewed that, provided comments, basically saying, as it's noted in your staff report, don't make any changes, please adopt this housing element, and then we will move on and then complete your rezoning so that we can again provide that your housing element is in compliance. So that's where we are today, and where we're hoping to get through tonight in terms of your recommendation. The actions under the general plan and zoning, the adoption of the housing element is actually a general plan amendment. So because it's considered a legislative act, but you're updating your general plan element, your housing element itself, and that's part of the general plan, so you're amending the general plan in that sense. That general plan amendment also includes revisions to the land use. You're going to add, as we're talking about later, potentially adding an overlay zone to the general plan designation to allow for affordable housing, specific to affordable housing, and specific to those sites 1 and 1A. And also a zoning ordinance amendment to amend the map, zoning map, to identify this is where the housing overlay is located, and then amending the zoning ordinance text itself, the municipal code. And again, here is the overlay zone. This is exhibit 1 in your staff report, and this identifies where the overlay zone would be located. It would be located on city-owned property. This is known as Site 1. This area, north of General Jim Moore, and only considering city property, and then Site 1A is east of General Jim Moore, north of South Boundary Road, Site 1. Site 1A is south of South Boundary, and located next to the 17-acre site. So again, adding the overlay district would amend the land use map as well as the zoning map. Adopting the housing elements as a general plan amendment, therefore the actions that you're considering and are in as part of the resolution or as amendment to the general plan and revisions to the land use designations, both for the general plan and the zoning ordinance. Essentially adding an overlay district for affordable housing to make those amendments. And those amendments are also included in your staff report. Specifically, they're shown as attachments to the resolution. An overview, we went over this extensively on the September 19th meeting with the joint meeting with the workshop with the City Council and the Planning Commission. The purpose of the zoning amendment is to facilitate the development of affordable housing. It does not construct housing, applies only to city-owned sites 1 and 1A. And the base zoning for those sites are visitor survey overlay general commercial. So because there's no residential, the overlay zone would allow the base zoning and the residential district. So essentially, you're allowing the zoning residential to meet the arena of 86 units, 270 total, with 6 cycle time. This is applicable only to the sites owned by the city. It's an overlay zone, is a designation, and to promoting affordable housing, which is required by HCD. And there's key parameters for rezoning. We talked about performance design standards. The minimum requirement for state law is 20 units per acre for the type of property city that you have. There's no maximum that we put in, so this city planning commission may want to put a maximum of 25 units. That's the minimum that HCD said that they would accept. Allowance for 3 stories of height, and similar to your R2 zoning height limit, and having some design review elements. Design review is part of the ordinance itself, proposing that design review is required as allowed under state law. Again, this amends the zoning map as well. Picture the zoning map and the area where currently is the former corridor. And this area is actually the CNPF parcel, the implant siting parcel. So it's not a part of this. And neither are sites K and K1, which is the reason that we've seen before in our previous housing element. So your current uses allows for commercial clubhouses, regathering, zoning allows conference hotels, auxiliary uses, neighborhood commercial. I think most people aren't aware or don't think about this because the focus is so much on housing. But there's a long history of development allowable uses within the former corridor on city-owned property. An EIR was done for the general plan at the time that the annexation occurred, and at the time the forward use plan EIR was done, the redevelopment plan EIR was done, and a number of other environmental documents. But I think the important information from this particular slide is allowable land uses now within the former corridor include 419,000 square feet of office park commercial center, a total of 526 units of what's called residential hotel, quote unquote. The majority of that is this hotel, not residential. There was no residential actually under the forward use plan. It was the 526 talked about potential 5 new units at the general residential in the city proper. So we're talking about 520 or so units of hotel on the forward site 1 and 1A. There was a golf course allowable use and 83,500 square feet of total commercial retail. And those are the total of that is what's allowable under the current general plan and zoning. What the overlay zone would do within the context of available resources would allow for residential within that as well. So it changed the overlay zone would allow for residential within that development area. The purpose of the amendment is to facilitate affordable housing. And to have a housing element that the HCD can determine to be compliant with state law. And you're also, as part of your staff report, we put together and during the September 19th period as well, we showed you a series of slides that talked about all the city's current zoning designations and what is allowable within those. So we wanted to show you, and it's in the staff report page, what would be currently allowable under your R2 zoning, under your commercial zoning, R1, your neighborhood commercial, special treatment, and visitor service uses. And so this gives you what's called the development standards, design standards. For instance, under R2, there's an allowable height limit of 35 feet. And that's similar to what the proposal is for the zoning fence. And again, we went through this at the last meeting on September 19th, and is available online under the staff report. The development regulations under the overlay zone is exclusively for affordable housing to meet the arena to allow residential use. And has the height limitations, the maximum 3 stories with the minimum density of 20 units per acre. Zoning ordinance is a part of your package, and it is included as one of the attachments, the proposed zoning ordinance. And so this is just a placeholder here. The actions that will be considered tonight are recommendations to the city council. One of the first actions is whether or not to recommend adoption of the housing element update for 5th cycle. The second is approval of that, again, as part of a general plan, that's part of your resolution that you've got attached to the staff report. Approval of a zoning amendment, zoning ordinance, and then consideration of certification of the EIR. Which is also has a mitigation monitoring and reporting plan that's included as attachment A of the staff report. The MMRP is basically identifies if development will occur or what does occur on that site. They have to comply, development would have to comply with each of the mitigation measures in the EIR. And that is a way to ensure that you reduce any impacts and you have control over future development. So the EIR that's before you, a draft EIR is prepared to provide public and any agencies with information on the impacts of implementation of the 5th cycle, as well as cumulative 6th cycle. It was prepared and circulated for a period of 45 days between August 14th and September 27th. Finally, EIR is required to contain a list of comments on the draft EIR, copies of the comment letters received, and responses to those environmental points raised in those comments, and then also in sections revisions of the document based upon that public review. As you can see within those of you that have reviewed the PIR, we received comments from Department of DTMT, Caltrans, BRAC, which is the Army office, and we also received a comment letter from Monterey Transit MST locally, and a comment letter from the Native Plant Society, CNPS, and a comment letter from Land Watch that was forwarding a number of different comment letters from previous documentation. So we provided in the draft EIR and the final EIR, in accordance with secret requirements, we provided responses on each of those comments, and then also master responses. When you're recommending consideration of certification of an EIR, you're looking at it that it's a full disclosure document that provides environmental information related to allow decisions to be made regarding a proposed project. Proposed project here is adoption of the housing elements and consideration of the zoning and general plan amendments. And then the city council will be able to take action on that, approve, revise, and reject the project that's on there. And one interesting thing to think about when you look at EIRs is the baseline. Baseline is what are the conditions now, both on the ground and from a standpoint of what's changing when you do this adopted, you consider adoption of the housing element. And basically what you're changing, what the baseline is the changes that were incorporated into the draft update to the housing element. Those are identified in your housing element fifth cycle draft that was been on the city website since April 2023. Those changes are located in chapter 7, and essentially it involves one change to the one program. And the program before in the 2019 housing element talked about, originally talked about rezoning the areas of sites 1 and 1A. Because of a threat of a lawsuit by Land Watch at that time, the city council determined not to put the language in there that says rezone, but they specified, specifically took out specifically rezoning for sites 1 and 1A. Sites 1 and 1A were still in the sites inventory. It's just an amendment of the language, and the environmental document actually already evaluated what the ISND that still stands. Also considered those actions as part of their draft ISND. But because of the fact that the city did not actually adopt that specific language, HCD in their comment letter, which they have 60 days on once you submit the housing element approved by the council to the state, HCD determined that, again, no, in order to be compliant, you have to rezone those properties. So that's one. I'd just like to take a moment and say the next set of actions. It's appropriate to ask questions, open the public hearing, and take public comments. It's important that we understand that any comments that are about the EIR, about the actions, and we sort of, if there's an EIR comment, we prefer to identify the EIR comment, or this is a comment on the action of the zoning or the general plan amendment. The planning commission will consider the information presented and then consider the action to adopt the resolution for the staff report. And we have a number of attachments that the actual language is the recommendation if the planning commission determines to do so. I'll put that up on the screen at the time. And again, the attachment to the staff report, the draft planning commission resolution, amendments to the general plan zoning ordinance, the draft affordable housing overlay zoning ordinance, the EIR, the final EIR is included in your staff report. And also online and available since Friday has been the final EIR itself, which includes the items that I talked about before, the final EIR, comment letters, responses, master responses, and then a set of changes to the draft EIR. So with that, if there's any questions, then we're appropriate to go into public comments.
So thinking about this, maybe we should take it in two pieces. So we'll talk about the housing element first, and then the EIR. But,
I think that's either way works. If we could take public comments all at once, that might be helpful.
okay. I'd like to come back to the planning commission first. Yeah, I'm glad the planning commission for questions for clarification.
Okay, I just had a few, on the report, right, go through here, some questions, some comments. First, Denise, I apologize, I do have a day job, so if I start asking about something that's in there and I just missed it, please let me know. It's probably quite a bit of a document to go through, and I might have missed some stuff. Page. Not number, okay, so
I think it's how
in
staff
the,
report or-
yeah, in the staff report here. Page 3, sites import, it's a more comment, I mean, at some point, you're looking at all the letters we're getting, I know we decided on the 1A quite a while back, that's been the focus. But we've also talked at different times about some of these different areas that we discarded, but at some point it might be good to get more detail in the document somewhere, particularly down in the industrial area, but people are asking about it and probably gonna keep asking about it and maybe get ahead of the power curve and explain why what rule doesn't work, or we've got deed restrictions or whatever, or underneath the light, the airport safety zone, whatever it is, whatever the reasons were, we don't get a lot of detail, and it might inform other people who are saying, hey, you're not looking at infill, you're just going out there and building it, so more might help with that a little bit.
With that, through the chair, would you like me to wait and answer questions at the end, or?
What I'd like to do right now is just, questions for clarification.
Okay, well, okay, I do have a couple of questions then. Under the, okay, we keep, under the overlay, is the affordable overlay, I just make sure, we keep saying residential when we say affordable, it covers all sorts of residential, correct? It's not just affordable housing, it's. we
It's
can
the
do-
affordable housing, I will wait to answer questions.
No, like, what's that clarification?
Okay, and
Yeah.
clarification is specifically affordable housing, residential,
So we want to build a market rate, we'd have to do something else.
yeah, there have to be.
Okay, well, that's, okay, that was one thing we was unclear.
So the developer, if
Yeah.
can I follow up, so the developer that would get, that would submit plans for the affordable housing could not also include in their, other housing. Is that correct?
Under this ordinance, it would be, they could submit plans for that, and then the city would consider those and determine whether they fit within this ordinance. It depends on what their affordability level is, et cetera, and a number of different things.
Okay, I was just looking, sometimes we say residential, and sometimes we say affordable, we tend to kind of mix and back and forth, and I just
Yeah.
want to be clear if it was only affordable housing, or if we could use, like that, if there's affordable and market rate under this, but.
The residential overlay zone talks about affordable housing overlay zone.
Okay.
That's the designation, and that's the allowable, specific to meeting arena.
Okay,
So the developer, chance for the other question, can come in and provide a mix of types of units. If those are also market rate, that have to be looked at. Or, you know, holistically, but, it's not specific to the overall zone.
okay. Under the biological resources, it says, A2 in the table. It talks about, in mitigation measures, talks about the result of well, one place it says survey, and then later in the paragraph it says surveys. It would seem that we would be doing multiple surveys if it's for different times of year, because is that, is that a good assumption, is that a bad assumption?
The mitigation requirements that are identified in the NMRP, starting on page 2, the biological resources, identify a number of different surveys that would be required depending upon the resource and how. So it's not just a survey.
It's not like, initially it's a singular, then it's plural, so I just want to make sure we're talking about doing multiple surveys throughout the year. Any one survey is probably not going to capture everything.
You're asking a specific question about the temporal nature of the surveys for plants.
Well, I guess it's multiple
I think
surveys.
that's-
Yeah, I think you answered my question.
Okay.
You said the multiple surveys. It's not just one.
I think you just need to read the mitigation. It's
Well, okay.
fairly clear, the biological required biological survey of development sites be conducted. Report describing results of the survey be provided. So you're required to do the biological report, and the results of the surveys have to be identified and not limited to each of those areas. From the biological resource, MMRP includes bio pages A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, specific to different resources, A8, and all the way up through almost A9. And those are specific to different types of communities, mammals, burrows, western.
Yeah, no, I know, I just,
Yeah, so the
and they
survey
also-
is, yeah.
yeah, they just all the paragraphs are all the singular, then they go, so I just want to clarify that it was. Not that you're saying, it's something you're saying probably would be multiple surveys, so that sounds good, I'm just checking. We talked about getting a biologist, the city said the city has to we'll get a biologist, I'm just curious, do we pay for that, or is that something we negotiate?
Just a little bit of explanation. So this is a mitigation plan and a mitigation launch plan.
Hmm.
When someone comes in and wants to develop a piece of property. So the developer typically the city would not be paying for survey work at all. That's part of the application process.
Yeah.
Requirements.
That's what I thought, thank you, I just want to make sure that was what I was assuming, like two assumptions. Are we currently working with the Army still? It says that here we are, and then it does say that it wasn't clear, that, are we still currently working with the Army?
The letter identified in the EIR,
Yeah,
comment letter B or C.
right,
Is from the Army and states that the Army,
that's still current, okay, good,
the Army letter was dated September
yeah, okay.
2023.
Okay. Better than something that was place all. Even plastic, that's good. All right. We're just clarifications first. No, I think the rest of what I have is no comments, so I'll wait to more comments. That's clarification. That's all I have.
Commissioner Arnold.
Yes, I have some questions regarding the development standards. So starting on page 4 of the document. First, I just wanted on that top table where we're talking about minimum acres. No one here.
Are you in the zoning ordinance?
No, I'm in our
EIR or the
Stuff.
I'm in the stack.
Okay, so there's a table that's located as additional information. That has 3 pages on that.
No,
Is that it? It's or into the attachments.
oh, the standards. So just in the table on top, I think we just want to make a clarification. It says that we have a minimum of 2 acres, and then in parentheses, it says 43,000 square feet. I think we just want to say that per acre, just so there's no confusion about the size there.
Okay, I found the table, thank you. So that was 42,560 square feet.
That's
an
1 acre?
It's 1 acre, so.
Right, so I think you just want to say 43,560 square feet per acre, just so it's clear.
Right, and I'm sure I'll find that.
Okay, and then just in general, we begin looking at some design standards. And some of these look like things that are HCD sources. So my question is, what was the sources that were used to put these together? And if it came from a single source, did we modify them at all? So that's my first question.
Okay, so actually some of these came from common ordinances from various locations. Overlay zone ordinances, I researched them through HCD. I got 4 different versions that we're looking at. I looked at it from the city of Capitola, Los Gatos, Kenesha, Oxnard, a number of different sources. Also, the specifically the ones that are HCD requirement, I think I put into the staff report for the most part. I also pulled in some of the elements that was from your R2 district, because you already, as I mentioned, that's why I wanted to show the commonality. You already have specific lot coverages or variations from the R2 district, particularly the front setbacks, and that type of thing. Common open space areas, those are basically from city, various other cities. So, maximum building coverage the same, distance between buildings on the same lot, item 7. That's specifically from your R2 zoning.
Okay.
The income restrictions, I'm kind of skipping around, so I apologize. Those are the affordable housing density designation, those are from HCD. And then the requirements of design review, who you can and cannot apply. That's also some common language from HCD. Building height R2. The intent of the design standards between distance to structures, that's the, specifically from your R2 again. And then the massing articulation, item number 9, that came from a combination of various different overlay zones, also my language thinking that was probably particular to the city. So not specifically. What we're trying to do is put in objective standards that also would be approved by HCD and allow the some non-subjective, some objective evaluation of the design review during the required design review process of this affordable development of housing. In other words, the planning commission will be looking at each of these developments through a design review process that is allowed and required under the zoning ordinance. So we're just trying to provide a little bit of a roadmap and some objective standards that we can use.
Thank you, that does answer my question, which I sort of did come from a mishmash of things. What I would like to request of our chair is that we take some time as a group, not tonight, but in the near future, that we can look at these all together and ensure that these really do meet the needs that we want specific to the Rey Oaks. I don't want to get into a situation where a developer comes and says, brings us something and say, oh, it doesn't meet the design standards, and they say, well, why did you put that in your design plan? Well, I don't know. Yes. I don't want to be in that situation where our credibility is diminished. So I'm requesting that we as a group spend some time together and maybe have some outside people help us to say, yeah, these are the standards, right, and we agree with that. And so maybe we would be able to say yes tonight, with stipulation that we have a chance to really review and make changes that's needed. So that's my request.
May I offer something as well?
Yes.
The development, as part of your general plan, housing element update 6 cycle, one of your programs is development of objective design standards. And I know that's key, something that you've been interested in. So a program to do that would allow exactly that, and then you would be amending some of your zoning standards, which has been a program in your housing plan for a number of years, various versions, because it does need updating. And then what you would be looking at is, does this meet your city requirements as a planning commission, which you'll also be looking at, does meet the state requirements for objective design standards. And also as required under HCD, there are development and incentives too. So there can be relaxed standards subject to the approval of the planning commission, council, and city manager. So that there is an allowance for, someone is coming in with a great idea, but it doesn't fit within the boxes. But it does meet the requirements generally, and something that the city would like to entertain. So that's an incentive to the developer to come in, and it also allows review by the planning commission.
And that's easier to do when, if as a group, we have a common understanding of why we chose the original suggested standards. And to me, design standards are not arbitrary. I mean, I'm able to just go in and say, okay, it's because this and that and such, and to really explain it. But if you don't understand that, then you can't respond to your neighbors.
Right.
And you can't be, flexible about it in a way that's consistent, across it. Might feel arbitrary to some people otherwise then.
So that was my one comment. The other or question or comment that I just had is I saw in a few places, including here, the assurance of affordability. And I think I saw in one place that the developer would need to come with a proposed plan on how they would be sure that affordability was maintained. So I kind of want to know, what would that typically look like? So when that did happen to us and we saw that plan from the developer, that we knew that that was something that really was reliable and consistent with other areas. So I think we just need some education on that particular component.
So the affordability categories are identified in the income restrictions on G, and it also identifies, under state law, what would be considered affordable. So the units would have to be designed to be costed for lease or sale, whatever they are, to meet these affordability requirements.
That's what I understood.
Definitely, a developer would be required to come in with the, I think it was 55 years. And it would be under the development agreement or some form of agreement that would run with the land. And I think maybe the city manager can ask, talk more about that.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if that was specifically the question that you asked.
No, I thought I had read that the developer would have to come in and say, overall, how would they administer to show that on an ongoing basis, this was still affordable, and that the people who were either buying or renting met those affordability needs. So I just don't understand how that would be administered on an ongoing basis.
Can you give me the specific location you're talking
Yeah,
about?
now, you know what, now that you said that, I don't know, I just remembered that when I was reading about the issue. But I can look while we're here and get back to you on that. I do remember it's part of the developer's responsibility.
Yeah, additional application requirements, application for development, the filed and reviewed with the identification of breakdown of affordable micro units, proposed means for assuring the continued existence, maintenance, operation of the project as an affordable project. That's one of the three requirements. I think that's probably what you're talking about. And this is managed throughout all jurisdictions and the states. And the appropriate method for assuring the continued existence, maintenance, operation of the project can be defined. It's not necessarily part of what needs to be defined right now. You know, but that's I understand the question.
Okay, thank you. And that was it.
Okay. So are you satisfied, that the sixth cycle will take care of the workshop issue?
Yeah, as long as we can put it together as one and do it with the 6 cycles and this, and then if we have to make amendments to this based on the 6 cycle, but that 6th cycle is right here. So I mean, it's not that it's
Cycle will start in January, sixth cycle one, if we approve this and move forward, then.
right. So I mean, it's right around.
So we need, yeah,
We need to
do
start planning.
our best to, approve the cycle. Okay, thank you.
I don't have a lot, but I did have question on clarification on letter C from the BRAC reassignment and closure. At the bottom, it talks about the footprints of the sites, and that they appear to encroach onto BRAC property. And I'm going, huh? I know that there were some issues that we encountered over the years with transfer of property from Fora and for whatever is taken over from them. I see like an administrator in, but I know there were some issues with getting the land properly assigned to us. I'm just a little bit concerned that is it just an overlay mapping issue as opposed to a real, you know,
Yeah, thank you for that question. The BRAC did make a comment that there was an issue. I think they identified it as related to the county's GIS system, which there has been an issue with the county's GIS that they're trying to fix, but identifies some overlap. I talked to Melissa Brownstone from the city of Seaside. She's working on that with the county as well as the BRAC office, and it doesn't impact the broad maps that we have here, but it was identified, I think, by BRAC as something that they are working on, not necessarily something that we can respond to or fix, or is necessary to fix as part of this.
thank you, that's all I have.
We want to try and keep this to the housing element background.
Okay, well, my question is about the tractor trade. And, the question I have is that it's on the second page, master response 2. It says that, so we're working here. Oh, okay, should I wait then?
Yeah, we're just gonna bring it.
Okay.
Back to later.
Okay. Okay.
I don't have any further questions, that was all the conversation. Okay, so I guess we'll start with EIR now. We'll start with,
Okay. So just one question and a couple of observations, comments, whatever. I water's always such a touchy subject, and we hang our hat a lot on some real stuff. I mean, back in '97 and northern stuff, but at some point, I was on the Monterey Subbasin Committee for the Shenandoah Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, say that fast 3 times, until they dissolved it. And so I saw the sausage being made. We got more. That's a very light issue. What's going to happen with groundwater? It's I know what Maricopa says they can give us, but this is something, this is a comment, and then the whole 6160 issue that's been brought up, we haven't addressed, so it'll be interesting to hear that be addressed later on. Not for this, because it's not, this is going to be flying just the way it is, but just making a comment. It's going to be interesting I'd like to know more about that down the road at some point, because yeah, I mean, there really only 10 residential units left. That's what we're saying that the consent agreement is signed, signed says. So it's just a comment in the water. In Native Plant Society, I'm just curious. They said that that the Department of Fish and Wildlife reached out to us and we didn't want to meet with them, or we didn't request a meeting. Is that right? Or I'm just kind of figuring why they're saying that. Is that?
Would you like me to respond to these individually?
yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead, it's for clarification.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, they made an accusation. I was like, I'd like to be able to say, no, you're wrong, or, whatever.
I think you're referring to a letter by the Native Plant
Yes,
Society.
the Native Plant Society letter, yes.
And the letter identified that you should be meeting with the CDFW.
Yes, exactly.
Department of Fish and Game,
Right,
Wildlife, sorry.
yeah,
Eastern Fish and Game. And we actually did speak with CDFW.
okay, good.
And it's listed on the changes to the draft AR to the first one
Okay.
when we spoke.
All right,
But typically, I think their reference was related to before a project, you should be talking to the CDFW. In this
okay,
case, I think it's important to note that there is no project, there's no location, there is no project reported that's gonna have any housing, and that's really, I think, a major issue with some of the comment letters that are not understanding. The project is an adoption of a housing element and a rezoning. It's the legislative, that meaning that it doesn't have any visible impact on the environment. Because the city wanted to do a good job and is doing the most it can for CEQA in accordance with CEQA requirements, looking at the whole of the future action. We did our best, and then EIR does a very good job of evaluating what could occur. generally in these areas, and what mitigation would be imposed, knowing what we know now, to ensure that there would be reduction of any potential significant impact on those areas. And I think that's possibly what the reference was in the
I think you're
CPS letter,
Yes.
but then in our ability to, in our wanting to talk with CDFW, before we received the letter, we had conversations with, the, members of the CDFW, regarding specific mitigation, things like that.
That's good, no, that's good, that's, you just answered my question, we did talk to him, and I was just, I was kind of hoping that'd be the answer, so that's good. And, no, I think it's good, Brian.
Michelle?
I remember.
No question. It's not. So if this doesn't work, I mean, this obviously, we just need to pass this right now, and the questions are there and in my case, anyway, from my understanding, and as I learned everything about the process and the different pieces of land we have. But one of my questions is that with the Army, we've been working with them, and they're saying that they're going to take the materials that's dangerous out of the ground area that we're proposing would be used for the affordable housing. Is that correct?
I'd be happy to clarify the question once you finish your question about.
And my question is, what do we do if that doesn't work, because it's expensive, fine at the end, so what happens if it doesn't work, if they don't get it done?
So I'm really clear, what happens if the hazmat is not. So I just, from an environmental standpoint, we looked at the impacts in the areas, and there have been a number of meetings before the planning commission that show the map that shows the area where there is no government restriction. So by way of background, there is what's called a covenant on the deed, that when the Army transferred the land to Bora, and then when that was transferred through early transfer process in 2007, on that, there was a certain amount of cleanup that was done by the Army, and the Rey Oaks received the property to that and additional cleanup in 2014, I think, with their remedial action plan, and they identified, they took out covenant of restriction against residential in the large portion in the middle of the site one. And so there is no restriction on residential use within approximately 89 acres within the former border property on site one. That's important to know. The second thing is the EIR identifies what needs to occur that's specific to what is the requirement under the BRAC, the EPA, the TTSC, the city of Seaside, who are now the environmental coordinators for this property. And that is that no development can occur, no construction until the residential on the other sites, until residential is lifted. And what will be, you're asking, I think, about who does that or how is that done?
I'm asking what happens if it's not finalized, because
What's not finalized?
well, see that you're answering my question without necessarily understanding the question, but that's good. Good try. So when I looked at the response of the letter, it got me the impression that the removal of whatever, of hazmat's material in there was not done yet.
I see what you're saying.
And but what you're telling me, if I understand the answer correctly, is that it's done. We just need to change the wording on certain documents, working with them to release it for the purpose we need it for.
I would love to clarify that if I may.
Yes.
Okay. So a portion of the property, there's covenants across the entire former border.
Yeah.
So, a certain portion of the property, the Army, when they cleared, has cleared through, and up down to 4 feet, and then that's the clearance that they've done throughout the entire property. The Army said that's enough when they transferred it, and said now you can do, what you want with the property. DTSC, as the state government overseer, said, you know what? We want to restrict residential, on this property until you, do some further proving that it is clear. So that is in simplest terms, what's happening right now. They removed a component of that property that I just talked about, the mill, that does not have a residential covenant restriction on it. And in relation to the EIR, I think it really is, important to note that there's section 3.9, for the record, hazardous materials identifies, the impacts of any potential future development and provides what DTSC came back with, and they reiterated the mitigation that we already provided in our EIR, stating that that's what we want you to do. So they've identified that any future development will have to go through that process. That process is lifting of a covenant and will involve oversight and review. But in the interim, there is available land. All that goes on for those that want to put residential housing, at least to start the process.
So there is a piece of it that's been cleaned up that we know can already be used for residential.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the rest of it is other areas around it that still need to be cleared out. And we don't know when that will be done. We hope that it will be done early enough for us to be able to use it. But if it doesn't, we're still okay.
I didn't pull that last part, I'm sorry. If I was just gonna share the screen so that I could show the property that I'm identifying.
Anything moving forward?
But yeah, when you build,
Right, so, and that is, so the property that I'm, showing on the. You see? Okay, so identifies this area. Right here.
If you look at the slide, you would not be able to see, it's.
Okay, maybe Troy, can you identify the area, please? This is Troy Lawson, I should have said.
It's this here part, correct? Is that not the 11th grid?
No, the 11th grid is the area that doesn't have, and it's in the EIR on figure 3, figure 4. Yeah. And oops, I just got.
that area is ready for,
It's still, yeah, it's ready, without having to have a covenant lifted, without having any approvals as such. The city, and it's in the EIR and the response to comments very carefully, and all the jurisdictions that are under fora have ordinance for regarding grading. And an ordinance allow, that notification and a number of different things that should you go into the property. You have to have training, clearance, and if you do construction, you have to do it in a certain manner, you get a pre-grading permit and pre-approvals. Relative to the potential for NEC to be discovered.
okay. So that was my first clarification question, and if I understand, well, there's a piece that we're good, because we have that piece for this phase of the, okay. And the rest of it, we'll cross that bridge when we cross that bridge. Yeah, if anything happens where the rest of it is not used. My second question is, I found it interesting to read about the different pieces, the different areas that had been considered as alternative. But then at the same time, like my colleague earlier, I really am thirsty for a table that would say this area, what the constraints are, and therefore why we didn't choose that area, and this other area.
I think we have seen that.
Yes,
before.
that table exists, and is done each iteration of the housing element is in the 2019 housing element. You're looking at sites 2, 3, and 4. I think it is in the 2023 housing element under NOC and chapter 3. It is identified in the constraints, chapter 4 of the housing elements, and identifies what constraints there are, and the site's inventory evaluation as to why. In tabular format and also in response to Commissioner Winker's question is also identified throughout each of the housing elements, and it has been presented for the City Council and the Planning Commission over approximately 4 to 5 different specific meetings and hearings, and I can identify the location of those long PowerPoints, to provide to you,
You know, I needed a new, I just haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
I'd love to do that, because now I'm driving around and I'm seeing, oh. Yeah. And it's not for me to decide, I trust the process, but I know that people neighbors will ask. They'll say, why?
But I think the other element I can answer to about the constraints relates to, available land, having enough land to put 184 for 6th cycle, 86 for 5th cycle. The number of people have asked over the years on, well, why wouldn't be able to just do, 270 or 86 or 184 ADUs? And that's also been, and as much as that might be something that for the future, if there's water that, individuals would like to do, it doesn't provide the adequate land area. The state has identified for 5th cycle in particular, they're still out to see what they're gonna say about 6th cycle, but they've identified sites 1 and 1A, and so I think that, there's that history. Plus the air, I think we've also talked about the airport, restrictions because of the flight path.
And the water, I think water restrictions are pretty, constraining.
Okay, I have nothing more. I'm satisfied with what I've seen and heard, everybody. I appreciate that. So we'll move on to public comment. So I'd like to try to do our best to keep it to 3 minutes, and please come up to the podium if you have anything, question.
I have a question. You may.
Step up, please.
My name is Michael Bryan. I live on West Avenue. Novice, if I have a quick question. If you have all these units are going in there, they're going to be sold by the developer, et cetera, maybe rentals. Would this be called an inclusionary property system where the city takes care of this and kind of monitors it? Who guides this?
So in other words, I think your question is whether or not this would be a city-owned property, and then who guides it, similar to the question from the previous commissioner in terms of how it's regulated, how it's monitored. The city could go into partnership with a developer or a nonprofit and go through and have a project. It's not being proposed yet. The developer typically would be, putting in an application, and the guidance is first with the application, and then with a review by the planning commission and council. And then there is a requirement for a development agreement to ensure, and requirements to ensure affordability and maintenance and operation, which I think is your question.
So would it be fair to assume that the developer would be taking care of all that? Seems to me that the city would be taking care of the applications and see if it is affordable, et cetera. Would be carrying the bag after that.
So through the chair, that I'd like to respond. The city would evaluate to determine whether it is affordable. Affordability requirements recommended by the state, and in terms of levels of affordability that you discussed earlier. And then the city does have oversight on all of that. And I think probably from a management standpoint, I'd like the city manager to answer that.
Yeah, well, that's really.
As far as I've gone.
That's a project specific question, it's not a question about what we're talking about tonight.
It seems like it's going to be something that's going to be going on and on perpetually. And that the city would have to take the applications and monitor it and make sure it's in line. That's all the question I had.
If the project came forward like that, then everybody has to consider it. You get it.
Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Comments from commissioners? Gary? No comment. Let me perhaps entertain a motion, and I will point out that there is a suggested verbiage for this.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion that, this is right, that we recommend to the city council that they approve the 2023 business cycle housing update the amendment to the general plan as proposed, and the amendment to the Del Rio Municipal Code as proposed to add an affordable housing overlay zone, defined areas within former Freeport and within the city in order to meet the city's RENA requirements under the fifth cycle housing.
Is there
And we also recommend that they approve the EIR that was prepared for this. That's what I'm saying.
Discussion. Okay, hearing none, call for a roll call.
So here we're. George Dash.
Yeah, none.
Celine. Aye. Louise Gibson. Aye.
And Gary.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Passed unanimously. Okay, thank you all for that. Appreciate it. Everybody in the others for showing up. Really got it. Okay, with that done, announcement by commissioners.
The status workshop's coming up, either, he's where, December.
No, I can't believe.
Well, it'd be so. Yeah, okay, so either it's where.
And you have a movie on Saturday.
Hmm?
And you have a movie. on
Moving up, yeah, but I'm just out watching the Union game, sorry. Last game.
All of the people who work on the fall picnic, it was a big success, and my grandson absolutely adored the pirate.
I too want to thank the CAG and everybody else who volunteered their time and their ovens, baked potatoes, and all the other effort that went into it. Locked out, it's a beautiful day, we had a little bit of air show to watch while they're doing it, and I want to thank everybody that helped make it a great success.
I'll add to that, our city mayor was giving a little talk and hopefully the jets flew by and was, thank you for the flyby. And, yeah, the picnic was really good. The chair of the Drew K paid for the bagpipe out of her own pockets. It was very nice of her. And we tried to get one for free because there's a bagpiper in the city, but apparently his wife already made an appointment or something else for him to do, so he couldn't do that. Yeah, we have the movie night, which should be pretty good. I went for Terminator, but they said it was a family thing, so darn.
What is
Anyway, I was curious, another note, a couple of houses are up for sale. Is the city owned, I don't know how they can do that, we've already, when we're maxed out basically for our Airbnb or short-term rentals. How do we notify realtors to tell potential buyers that don't plan on buying this house for a short-term rental? There's one already, I think, sold by a person in Carmel, and they, well, would somebody in Carmel want to move to Del Rio Oaks unless they wanted to make a short-term rental? So I just question that.
They want sunshine.
Yeah, so anyway, that was just a question, that's gonna be interesting, why didn't you tell me? Any of that, yeah, Santa's workshop and movie night, that's all I have to say, thank you.
I enjoyed going to the kitty parade. I thought there was a kitty parade. Just cats. But it was there, yeah, so it was pleasant event. Thanks to everybody who was involved.
While we were setting up, there was a gentleman who was walking his dog, and he was under the impression that this was a city picnic, and I had to ensure him that the city wasn't involved, it was strictly Drew K. You know, it was our doing, and he was thinking that, you know, why is his money, he was sort of implying, why is the city money getting involved in all this? I had to keep on ensuring that, no, we're not, there's no politics in drill tanks, so I just wanted to make sure, almost pushing. Yeah.
Okay, great. I wanted to thank Denise, just that, this is a lot, there's a lot, this is a lot. And this is, I mean, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg really here, so thank you. The,
Right.
the picnic was a success, that was a lot of fun, the weather was perfect and all that. I don't see anything more, I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Uh,